I see a woman in my dreams. She is blonde and beautiful, like an ancient Greek statue. She sits underneath a dying tree near a beach, eating an apple. There is a structure in the water, far off in the distance, glowing. The woman is saying something to me, I think, but I can't hear her, despite her mouth moving. I think she is calling to me. I try to reach out and touch her, but I can't move my arm. I look down and see that I have no limbs, and instead of my body, there is a squirming pile of flesh. I try to scream, but I cannot. The woman is speaking, and I try to tell her I cannot hear her, but I cannot speak. I want to cry, but I cannot. Please, help me, mother, I say, but there is no sound. Nothing but the lapping waves of the ocean as it tries to consume me. The water is blood red, and despite it being night, there is not a star in the sky. I jolt awake in my bed, sweat streaming down my face. The same dream, the same woman, the ocean. It means something, I know it does. Every time I go to sleep, I see the same scene. It's getting to the point where it is difficult to rest at night, knowing that I am just going to show up in that same place again. This lack of sleep, among other things, that I have recently been afflicted with is making it difficult to lead my congregation, and I worry people are starting to notice. Especially at such a trying time. They are looking to me to be a guiding force, and I cannot show any signs of weakness. I will simply have to power through it and figure out what these dreams mean so that they stop, or at the very least, I need to learn how to tolerate them. But the day is upon me, and it is time to make myself look presentable. I do, however, take a moment to relish the fact that I have a proper room now, and not some pathetic tent out in the cold. The previous residents of the building fled when they heard the news of the beasts on the radio, although I have no idea where they were running to, and the few that remained I was able to convince to join us with the help of some of the bulkier members of the flock. Unsavory? Perhaps, but one must do unsavory things to get what they need to survive, especially when law and order breaks down so quickly. When the beasts had first emerged on the fateful day of my rise to power, they had attacked anybody and everybody in the streets, scooping them up to take them who knows where to do who knows what. It was chaos. I thought back to that night, only shortly after giving my speech to the crowd. After the chanting had died down, I rounded everybody up to prepare them. We had no real weapons to speak of, so the few people that had various pocket knives and homemade machetes came to the front, where I instructed them to keep an eye out around the camp. They nodded, a strange glint in their eyes as they did what they were told. The whole environment had an unworldly feel to it, as though we were all collectively holding our breath for the next big thing to hit us. Which we were, I suppose, but it felt more like we were at the top of a roller coaster and preparing to plunge down the first hill, rather than preparing to possibly fight for our lives. Perhaps it was due to my speech, or maybe it was the absurdity of what we had heard on the radio, but nobody seemed to be taking the threat seriously. Nobody, that is, except for me. I knew what we were in for, what was to come. The visions had shown me so. The woman who was consumed by the pillar of flesh, the soldier attacked by the beasts in the trenches. These things were real, and I had to prepare. I was a shepherd, and my flock was relying on me. But, as I was soon to discover, it didn't matter if they did or didn't believe in the threat. It was coming to us. We began to gather ourselves, some people checking supplies and others attempting to throw together some kind of weapon, some even curling up to go back to bed in the various nooks and crannies. It made me think back to when I had first migrated people out of the sewers, so that we didn't have to live with the rats and smells anymore. Some had refused, saying they liked living down there. It was sheltered from the rain, and warmer, they had argued. Those people I left behind to their own devices. Perhaps they were right. It was more practical in that respect. But I had no interest in living in the muck like that. I wanted to see the sky, feel the wind. It did result in the cold and weather being much more of an issue, as they predicted, however. We had tents and things of that nature, but I craved walls and roofs made of sturdier stuff. And I had a feeling that this invasion, so to say, was just the opportunity to do so. But first, we would have to weather this initial storm. I hadn't been lying to them about any of that, as I really did want to raise them. And of course myself. From the ashes of this conflict, which I knew deep in my heart was going to be so much worse than anyone could ever imagine. Chalk it up to the visions, I suppose, or even simple intuition. It would not be long now. It was, in fact, only a few hours before it began, shorter than even I had anticipated. I heard it before I saw it. Sirens in the distance. Not an uncommon sound in the city, not at all, but then they began to increase in quantity and volume, seeming to come from every side. That quickly caused the chatter to stop around the camp, and instead people began to look around in fear, trying to figure out what was going on. Some of them even turned to me, the expressions on their faces making it clear that they were hoping for guidance. And I knew that this was my chance. "Rally, everyone! Come together now! We'll be safer as a group," I instructed, putting as much authority into my voice as I could manage. They began to gather near me, worry in their eyes as the sirens filled our ears. I looked around, trying to figure out what I had available to me and what to do next. It wasn't safe to stay out here in the clearing, that was for sure. We needed shelter. I went and stood on the same box on which I had given my speech previously, attempting to get a better view of the surrounding area, as well as seeing who had come to me. It was a rather motley crew, mostly being composed of scraggly-looking men and a few elderly folks, but it would have to do. I peered around at the surrounding buildings, but none of them were suitable. I knew one that would do, however. It was a smaller apartment building made of brick and stone that was only a few blocks away from here, nestled in between two other larger buildings. The back of it faced out into a drainage basin, the very same one that I had first discovered the strange meat room, but a ways up from that particular location. The apartments were mostly empty, and the area would be a fairly easy place to defend from any intruders, as the street it was situated on was narrow. All of these justifications were fairly reasonable, and that is what I would tell the congregation, which I knew that they would readily accept. But there was another reason I wanted to take that particular apartment building for our living quarters, one that I kept to myself. This was the building I had been kicked out of when I failed to make rent, you see. And so I wished to return as a conquering general, to prove to that pathetic, stupid landlord the terrible mistake that he had made. While perhaps it was a tad petty of me to take advantage of the general situation to satisfy my own personal grievances, I didn't really care about that. I wanted my revenge. I attempted to keep the gleeful smile off my face as I informed the people of my decision, finding it difficult to not take joy at the imagined face of the fool when me and my small army appeared. My self-gratification was cut short, however, when one of the men I had sent out to guard the perimeter came rushing back into the clearing, panting and covered in filth and grime and blood. He pushed his way to the front of the crowd, desperation in his eyes as he stopped in front of me, crimson red running out of a cut on his face. "What is it?" I questioned, not looking forward to the answer. "We were attacked, Miss Athalia. Me and Potiphar. We were keeping watch, just like you said, And as we were talking, all these people started to run by. Just a huge crowd, had to be at least a couple hundred. Potiphar, he yelled at them, asked them what they were running from, but nobody answered. They just kept moving. It was something terrible, the way they were running, Miss Athalia. They were pushing each other and shoving. I even saw a guy get trampled underfoot by the crowd. If me and Potiphar weren't up sitting on the wall, we would have been dragged in right along with them. He gulped here, and I could see that he was physically shaking. His eyes darted around nervously, looking at the crowd that was silently gathering around him as he told his story. He rubbed his arm, drawing my attention to the fact that there was a long cut along it. Well, Potiphar, he always liked to be in charge, you know. So he started shouting at him, trying to get some sort of organization going, or get some answers from them, or something. I don't even know. But nobody is listening to a word he says. They just keep running. So he stands up on the wall, and I tell him, you gotta get down from there. It ain't safe. But he doesn't listen to a word I say ever. He just keeps shouting at the crowd, all angry. So, 'cause of that, I notice it first. He takes a heavy breath here, and I narrow my eyes, having a sinking feeling I knew what he was going to say. The vast majority of the congregation had gathered around us at this point, hanging on to every word of his tale. It was a beast, Miss Athalia. I don't know how else to describe it. It was huge, the size of like a bus or something, and it had legs. So many legs. It scrambled around on them, climbing over cars and signs and junk. And it had mouths, more than one, that extended way out away from its body. They were like elephant trunks, but thick as a telephone pole. They were... His voice broke here, and he stifled back a cry. Keep going. It's all right, I said gently. I needed him to finish his story, so that everyone would know what we were up against, to eliminate any lingering doubt in their mind about what I had said. He nodded as he inhaled deeply, and continued. It was eating people, just picking 'em up and swallowing 'em whole. A gasp rose up from the crowd, as I nodded grimly. The mouths. It would grab a person and lift them up in the air, and the people, they would just scream and scream. Then it would gulp 'em down, still screaming, right down the gullet. I could see their bodies traveling through the trunk part, a big bulge, traveling all the way down. Sometimes they would still be struggling. I could see them kicking and punching the damn thing. It was like a baby inside a woman pushing against the walls of her stomach. He shuddered violently at that. And behind it, it had this big tube running out of the back, stretching off back down the street where it came from. I don't even know where it went to. But the worst part was the smell. Mixed in with the blood and sweat, I could almost feel it oozing from the beast. It was the smell of my ma's apple pie, all sweet and tasty like when it had just come out of the oven. I almost fell off the wall when I smelled it. It was weird, Miss Athalia. It was real weird. I felt like I was almost falling into a trance. His whole body shivered again, and there were now murmurs circling around the crowd as he continued. Well, I guess I did a bit of a better job of holding it together than Potiphar, or maybe he just slipped, 'cause the fool finally stopped screaming at the people, who weren't even listening to him anyway, mind you, and went and fell right into the fucking crowd. Another gasp from the crowd, louder this time. He landed on the street, see? And I couldn't make heads or tails of where he went on account of all the screaming and running, and there was still the goddamn thing, getting closer as it kept eating up more and more people. That snapped me right out of it. It couldn't have been more than a couple 100 feet away, and the crowd was so thick that it was like a river of people. It was a nightmare, so much screaming and crying and pushing, and I was trying to find Potiphar while staying on top of the wall, but there was a snowball's chance in hell of that happening. So I jumped down after him. Looking back at it, maybe not the best move, but it's what I did. The ground was madness. Pure madness. He reached up and touched the cut on his face, which had crimson streaks still running out of it, staining his fingertips. People slamming into me left and right. I could barely stay standing. I wandered around, trying to find him, barely able to think above the noise. Screaming, fighting, and behind it all, the noises of the beast getting closer and closer. It's no doubt a miracle that I actually found him. Bumped right into him with my foot, nearly stumbled and fell myself. If that hadn't happened, I would never have seen him. The crowd was running right over him, stomping on him. I saw a woman step on his hand with her boot even as I watched. I tried to pull him up, but it was no use. He was dead. He looked down at the ground now, his voice choked, and I saw tears running down the face of some of those in the crowd. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. He took a moment, gulping heavily, and a man behind him gave a reassuring pat on his back. Finally, he inhaled deeply and resumed. I couldn't get to him, you know. The crowd was too thick. I knew that I would never make it out of there in time. And worse, when I looked up, the thing was right there, its mouths grabbing anything that moved. I saw it reach down and pluck up a woman right next to me, like it was nothing. I could hear her scream, right through the flesh of the thing. He put his head in his hands at this point. I didn't even try to grab her. I just ran, pushing and shoving my way through the crowd. I climbed back over the wall, I don't even know how, and ran all the way back here. He started to cry now, big racking sobs. He was my friend! He was my friend, and I left him there for that thing to eat! He cried out, and the same man who's patted his back earlier put his arm around his shoulders, comforting him. Thank you for telling everyone this, I said to him, causing him to tearfully nod his head. I climbed back up on top of the box, drawing all eyes to me. Here you can see proof of what I said to be true. There is no more time to waste. There may be more of these things coming, and as they do, even more people will panic. Do you want what happened to Potiphar to happen to you? To your loved ones? I yelled out, causing a chorus of "No!" in response, with people glancing at the weeping man. Then gather your belongings and tell the others to do the same, and meet back here in 10 minutes. We are getting to safety, I shouted, causing a loud roar of approval in response. I hopped back down from my stand to do the same, smiling grimly to myself. This was exactly what they needed to kick their asses into gear. Before, they hadn't been treating this nearly seriously enough, almost acting like it was a joke. But as I looked around now, I saw the determination etched into each and every one of their faces. Oh yes, they would follow me anywhere now. I went back to my small tent, intent on gathering my meager items. It really wasn't much. My mirror, a couple changes of clothes, and of course, my cooler of meat from the subterranean room. I doubted I would actually have need of it in the coming days, for if everything went according to plan, we would be able to scavenge for food in the surrounding area fairly easily. But I wanted it for myself. I knew that this was what was giving me my visions, and I had no intention of giving that up anytime soon. I started to strip, wanting to get into something fresh before we began our potentially dangerous journey to the apartment building. None of my clothes were what I would call particularly clean, but some were better than others. As I changed, however, something caught my eye in my scratch mirror, causing me to suddenly stop in the middle of putting a new shirt on. A sick feeling rose in my stomach as I took the shirt back off, staring at what I had caught a glimpse of before. There, on the left side of my stomach, was an eyeball staring back at me. It was nestled into my skin like a mole, as though it had always been there, and even as I looked at it in the mirror, it itself looked around the room. Slowly, I tore my gaze from the mirror and looked down at my stomach, causing the eyeball to stare back at me from its lower vantage point. I was finding it difficult to breathe at this point, and I could feel a scream rising in my throat, one I was barely able to choke down. Slowly, ever so slowly, I reached a hand toward it, causing it to tear its cursed gaze away from me and look at the approaching finger. I gently touched the corner of the eye, causing it to squint in annoyance. It was soft and squishy. I realized I had been making a low droning noise for a while now, like the last terrible note of agony being pulled out of the agape mouth of a dying man. But suddenly, perhaps mercifully, the moment was interrupted by the voice of Hagar coming from the outside of the tent. This caused me to quickly snap my attention to the entrance, which she thankfully didn't enter through. "Ma'am, is everything all right in there? Almost everyone is gathered in the clearing, just like you asked. We are all waiting for you." Yes, it's fine," I snapped back without thinking. "Leave me be. I'm almost done in here." "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am," she responded quickly, and I heard her move away from the tent. I took a deep breath, glancing back at the terrible eye. It was looking at the entrance, and as I watched it blink slowly, causing a great and terrible emotion of which I do not know the name of to well up in my throat. I quickly threw the new shirt over my body, finally covering the aberration up. That was something to deal with at a later time. I gathered everything up and hastily exited the tent, not even sparing it a glance back. I had bigger and hopefully better things to look forward to, and to worry about. Quickly I assessed what I was working with. A group of about 60. Not a huge amount, but most certainly not small. It was quantity over quality, however, as almost everyone was in some state of dishevelment and sickness. A reigning army this was not, but there is undeniably strength in numbers. These people, with their humble lives on their backs in the forms of bags and backpacks, they were my congregation, no matter how pathetic they may be. I stood back up on my box platform, turning to address them one final time on it. Hagar stood by my side, ready to execute any order I were to give her. "Do we have everything assembled? Is everyone here?" Murmurs of affirmation ran through the crowd, which I determined to be good enough. "Good. We head for the apartment building immediately, which we will take for ourselves and turn into our new base of operation. Once we are there, we will figure out the future, but for now, we must focus on the present. Already, we have lost one of our own to the monsters that now roam the streets." I gestured to the man who had lost his friend, who nodded in agreement. I didn't remember his name, but that was not particularly important. "We must all stick together. I will lead the way, so make sure to never lose sight of me. But you should also pick a partner to keep track of them, and for them to keep track of you, so that we don't lose anyone else in the chaos. I will not lie to you. It's going to be a difficult journey, but if we move as one, we should all make it there in one piece." A hand shot up from the crowd to my mild surprise. I had not intended for this to be an open seminar, but nevertheless I humored them, pointing at them to speak. "You, what is it?" "Well, I was wondering, why that apartment building in particular? It's a fair bit away. Why not one of the ones that are right here?" I narrowed my eyes, looking closer at the man who had spoken. I didn't recognize him, but he had a hard face, with a long scar running down the side of it, and a grizzled look about him. He stared back at me, gaze unflinching. This man may be a problem. "Well, it is quite simple. While these apartments may be closer, the one I have selected is next to water, in case that gets shut off or disabled for some reason. It is also in an easily defensible position, with tall buildings on either side, thus making it difficult for any would-be looters, or even the monsters, to get a hold of us. I think those are good enough reasons, don't you?" I said, smiling sweetly at him. He simply raised an eyebrow, undeterred. "And it has nothing to do with the fact that that building is the one you used to live in before you got kicked out of it?" I felt my heart skip a beat, but I attempted to maintain my smile, although it may have been more of a grimace at this point. "No, I assure you it is not. And how did you know that, exactly?" I said, smiling still through gritted teeth. He shrugged, undeterred. I was just here when you first joined this little group, that's all. I remember you ranting and raving about it for days. It ain't nothing personal, miss. Ah, yes, I remember that. I had been quite upset indeed, but still, not my proudest moment. Well, if there are no more questions, then I think it's best we get going, everyone. We don't want to burn any more daylight than we must, I shouted to the crowd, pointedly ignoring the man as I gestured to the rising sun. Yet another problem arisen that I may have to deal with in the future. For now, the night was done, and we had a journey to make. Everyone nodded, a little less sure now, and I hopped down from the box, signaling for them all to follow me. The best thing now was to keep everyone moving and on the alert, so that they would not think too hard about that particular line of questioning. Hagar ran up to be at my side as I took the front of the pack, everyone falling behind me in a loose group. She handed me a metal pipe, which I took in my hands, feeling the reassuring cool weight of the metal. We moved in silence for a moment, heading to the edge of the clearing to get on the road toward the building. In the distance, there was screaming and sirens, but here, it was almost deathly still. She was silent for a moment, walking alongside me, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. I didn't mind, to be perfectly honest, as there were some things that I'd rather not think about right now. For instance, the terrible eye that even now I could almost feel underneath my shirt. In comparison, the seeming end of the world seemed almost cheery in comparison. Where do you think the police are? And the military? Shouldn't they be doing something? Hagar asked, breaking the silence as I knew she would. I sighed. It was a fair question. We could indeed hear sirens, as previously mentioned, but we had yet to actually see law officers doing any sort of defense. And, as dim-witted as she was, Hagar was right. This incursion most certainly warranted military intervention. I don't know, to be honest. Perhaps the military is dealing with even bigger threats somewhere else. The radio did say this was happening all over the world. As for the police... I stopped for a moment here, looking back and checking the group as we reached the street. They were all still there, as far as I could tell. Maybe they were the first to go. Hagar had nothing to say to that. The street was surprisingly quiet, with only a few people frantically moving through it, sparing only a quick glance at our comparably large group. It looked as though a riot had taken place here, with cars tipped over and smashed windows all around. Even as I watched, some looters poured out of a jewelry store cackling about their ill-gotten goods, but, thankfully, not bothering us. Animals. They had no idea how worthless those trinkets really were. It seemed that, aside from them, however, almost everyone had elected to stay indoors, as per the radio's instructions. Or, what had happened to the man and his friend had become more common than we thought, and there simply were no more crowds left. Either way, the silence was unnerving. Alright, everyone, this way. Remember, stick together, keep track of your partner. I addressed the crowd, who turned to the left, same as me. It should only be about a couple hours' walk, so hopefully there would be no incidents, and we would be able to make quick time. But, as anyone who had ever done any sort of leadership over large crowds will tell you, the group is only as fast as their slowest member. We moved at an excruciatingly slow snail's pace, resulting in an increase to my frustration as the time dragged on as little inconveniences piled up. People kept tripping, or needing to stop for some asinine reason, or were simply slow because of injury or age. If I had it my way, we would have left the sick and elderly behind, and only taken the somewhat healthy. But I know that would have caused mass outrage among the group. So, I gritted my teeth and dealt with it.